Have you ever wondered if a person can spend years believing they understand a connection, only to discover they were completely wrong about its purpose? That's exactly what is happening to your soulmate right now. For the longest time, they thought they had already figured out why you entered their life. They gave the connection a simple explanation. They placed it into a category that made sense to them. Maybe they believed you were only meant to be a temporary chapter. Maybe they thought you were simply someone who appeared during a particular season of their life. Whatever conclusion they reached, they felt confident in it. They believed the mystery had already been solved, but recently something unexpected changed the way they see everything. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a dramatic event that suddenly revealed all the answers. Instead, it began through quiet reflection. A memory returned. A lesson resurfaced. A realization appeared where certainty once existed, and for the first time, they started questioning whether they had misunderstood the entire purpose of your connection from the very beginning. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more unusual things started becoming. Certain moments they once considered insignificant suddenly seemed important. Certain conversations carried meaning they had never noticed before. Even experiences that appeared unrelated somehow started connecting back to you. It was as though pieces of a puzzle they had been carrying for years were finally beginning to fit together, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes life hides the true purpose of a connection until the right moment arrives. Sometimes people are so focused on what is happening that they cannot see why it is happening. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that your presence in their life may have served a much deeper purpose than they ever imagined. What shocks them most is not what they are discovering. It is how long the answers were sitting in front of them without being recognized. And now, as those answers slowly come into focus, they are starting to understand that you were never just another person who crossed their path. You may have entered their life for a reason, far greater than either of you understood at the time. And that realization is only the beginning. And listen carefully, because the more your soulmate looked back, the more they began noticing something that had been hidden in plain sight the entire time. At first, they believed they were simply revisiting old memories. They thought they were reflecting on moments that no longer carried much importance. But the deeper they went, the harder it became to maintain that belief. What started as simple reflection slowly turned into discovery. They began seeing details they had completely overlooked when those moments originally happened. Details that now seemed impossible to ignore. One memory led to another. One realization connected to another. Suddenly, events that once appeared random no longer felt random at all. They started recognizing patterns. Certain conversations with you had influenced decisions they would make years later. Certain lessons they learned through the connection continued shaping the person they eventually became. Even challenges they once resented began revealing a purpose they never understood before. It was as though life had been quietly leaving clues all along, but they lacked the perspective needed to recognize them, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes understanding arrives long after the experience itself. Sometimes we are too close to a situation to see its true meaning. Only when enough time has passed can we step back and recognize how deeply certain people affected our journey. Your soulmate is beginning to experience that realization now, and listen to this. What surprised them most was how often their personal growth seemed connected to experiences involving you. The confidence they eventually developed, the lessons they learned about themselves, the emotional strength they gained, the way they started viewing relationships, trust, and connection. Piece by piece, they noticed that many of the most important changes in their life traced back to moments they shared with you. Not always directly, not always obviously, but undeniably. At first, they resisted that conclusion. It felt too significant, too difficult to accept. They preferred the simpler explanation, that you were just one chapter among many. But the evidence kept growing. The more they reflected, the more impossible it became to ignore the influence you had on their life. What they once viewed as isolated memories now appeared connected by a larger purpose. There were moments they once dismissed as ordinary that now felt extraordinary. Conversations they barely remembered suddenly carried wisdom they only understand today. Even difficult experiences gain new meaning. Things that once felt confusing now seem necessary. Things that once felt painful now appeared to have guided them toward growth they may never have achieved otherwise, because your heart needs this right now. Some people enter our lives not simply to share moments with us, but to transform us in ways we cannot immediately recognize. The transformation often happens quietly. It unfolds over months, years, and life experiences. By the time we finally understand it, we are no longer the same person we were when the journey began. And listen carefully. Your soulmate is starting to realize that the connection was never as simple as they once believed. They thought they understood its purpose. They thought they had already learned everything there was to learn from it. But now they see that many of the answers they were searching for were hidden inside the connection itself. Every reflection reveals another piece of the puzzle. Every memory reveals another lesson. Every realization brings them closer to understanding why you entered their life in the first place. The most shocking part is not that these clues existed. The most shocking part is that they were always there. They were woven into conversations, experiences, choices, and moments that seemed insignificant at the time. And now, as those pieces finally begin fitting together, your soulmate is finding it harder and harder to believe that your arrival in their life was merely a coincidence. In fact, they are beginning to suspect that the real reason you entered their world was far more important than anything they ever imagined. And that truth is only starting to reveal itself. And listen to this, because the realization did not arrive the way your soulmate expected it to. They were not searching for a breakthrough. They were not sitting down with the intention of uncovering some hidden truth about your connection. In fact, the moment that changed everything happened during a completely ordinary period of reflection. They were simply looking back at their life, examining where they had been, where they were now, and how they had become the person they are today. But as they followed that path backward, they kept arriving at the same place. They kept arriving at you. At first they tried to dismiss it. Surely it was coincidence. Surely they were just focusing too much on one chapter of their life. Yet the more honestly they examined their journey, the harder it became to deny what they were seeing. So many of the most important turning points seemed connected to your presence. So many of the lessons that shaped them could be traced back to experiences they shared with you. What once looked like separate events now appeared connected by a thread they had never noticed before. Because your heart needs this right now. Some realizations do not come through new information. They come through seeing old information in a completely different way. The facts remain the same, but the understanding changes. Your soulmate is experiencing exactly that. Nothing about the past has changed, yet everything about the way they see it has, and listen carefully. As they continued reflecting, they began noticing something even more surprising. The person they were before meeting you and the person they became afterward were not the same. At the time, they never recognized the transformation. Growth rarely feels dramatic while it is happening. Most people only recognize it when they look back years later. And now, looking back, they can see how profoundly your presence influenced their path. You challenged assumptions they once carried. You brought lessons they were not expecting to learn. You forced them to confront parts of themselves they might have avoided otherwise. Even moments that felt difficult at the time now appear meaningful. Even experiences they once questioned now seem to have served a purpose. The more they reflect, the more they realize that your role in their life extended far beyond what they originally believed. Because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes people enter our lives not to give us what we want, but to awaken what we need. The lesson is rarely obvious in the moment. It often reveals itself years later, when enough growth has occurred for us to finally understand why the experience mattered. Your soulmate is beginning to reach that level of understanding, and listen to this. The realization became even stronger when they started considering who they might have become if they had never met you. That question stayed with them. It followed them through quiet moments and honest reflection. The answer was impossible to ignore. Without your influence, certain lessons may never have been learned. Certain strengths may never have developed. Certain perspectives may never have emerged. Whether they fully appreciated it at the time or not, your presence altered the direction of their personal journey. What shocked them most was discovering that the connection was never only about feelings, timing, or circumstances. It was about transformation. It was about growth. It was about becoming someone different because of what the connection revealed inside them. That understanding changed everything. Suddenly, experiences that once seemed confusing began making sense. Questions they carried for years started finding answers, because your heart needs this right now. The most powerful revelations often arrive quietly. There is no dramatic announcement, no sudden sign pointing the way. There is simply a moment when the truth becomes so clear that it can no longer be denied. Your soulmate is standing in that moment now, and for the first time, they are beginning to understand that you may have entered their life for a purpose far greater than either of you ever imagined. The deeper they look, the more impossible it becomes to believe otherwise. And listen carefully, because this is the stage where everything they thought they knew about the connection begins transforming into something much deeper. The realization that you influenced their growth was only the beginning. What truly surprised them came afterward, when they started understanding exactly what those lessons were. For years, they focused on what happened between you. They focused on specific memories, specific moments, and specific circumstances. But now their perspective has shifted. Instead of looking at the connection itself, they are looking at who they became because of it. And the answers they are finding have left them stunned. At first, they noticed how many of their strongest qualities developed after your arrival in their life. Qualities they once took for granted suddenly seemed connected to experiences they shared with you. The confidence they gained after overcoming certain challenges. The emotional maturity that emerged through difficult lessons. The self-awareness that slowly developed as they learned more about themselves. None of these changes happened overnight. They unfolded gradually, often without them realizing it. Yet now, looking back, they can trace so much of that growth to the influence your connection had on them, because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes people enter our lives not to stay forever, but to awaken parts of us that were waiting to be discovered. We often mistake the purpose because we focus on the relationship itself rather than the transformation it creates. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that distinction now, and listen to this. One of the biggest revelations they have experienced is realizing that you challenged them in ways nobody else did. Not always intentionally, not always through direct conversations. Sometimes your mere presence forced them to confront things they had been avoiding. Certain fears, certain insecurities, certain beliefs about themselves that no longer served them. At the time, those experiences felt uncomfortable. At times, they may have even felt frustrating. Yet now they see those moments differently. They recognize that growth rarely happens inside comfort zones. Growth happens when life introduces us to people who inspire us to evolve beyond who we currently are. The more they reflect, the more they notice that many of the most important turning points in their life followed lessons connected to you. Decisions they made, risks they eventually took, perspectives they developed. Even their understanding of love, trust, vulnerability, and emotional connection was shaped by what they experienced through this journey. What once appeared to be isolated events now seem connected to a larger process of personal transformation. Because your heart needs this right now. Some connections are not designed merely to create memories. Some connections arrive to create growth. They challenge us, stretch us, teach us, and ultimately prepare us for versions of ourselves we could not have become alone. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that your role in their life may have been exactly that. And listen carefully, Another realization has started emerging as they continue this reflection. For years, they focused on what they wished had happened differently. They focused on unanswered questions, missed opportunities, or circumstances they could not control. But now those thoughts are slowly being replaced by something else: gratitude, not because every moment was easy, not because every lesson was pleasant, but because they can finally see the value hidden within the experience. They can see how much they learned. They can see how much they grew. They can see how much stronger they became because of everything the connection taught them. What shocks them most is that they are beginning to understand your purpose in their life had very little to do with coincidence. The timing, the lessons, the growth, the transformation, all of it now feels interconnected. What once seemed random now appears meaningful. What once felt confusing now feels intentional. The deeper they look, the harder it becomes to believe that your arrival in their life happened without purpose, because your heart needs this right now. The greatest gifts people bring into our lives are not always obvious when they arrive. Sometimes the gift is wisdom, sometimes it is healing, sometimes it is growth, and sometimes it is a mirror that helps us see ourselves more clearly than ever before. Your soulmate is beginning to realize that you brought all of those things in one form or another, and listen to this. The more they understand, the less they view the connection through the narrow lens they once used. It's no longer simply a story about two people crossing paths. It is a story about transformation. It is a story about becoming. It's a story about how one person's presence can alter another person's journey in ways that continue unfolding long after the original chapter seems complete. That understanding is changing how they view every memory, every lesson, and every moment connected to you. Now, instead of asking why you entered their life, they are beginning to understand what you came to teach them. They are beginning to understand what you awakened within them. They are beginning to understand why your influence remained long after so many other experiences faded away. And with every realization, one truth becomes clearer than ever before. You were never simply part of their story. You became one of the reasons their story changed. And that realization is preparing them for the most shocking truth of all, the full understanding of why your soul crossed their path in the first place. And listen to this, because after all the reflection, all the memories, and all the pieces finally coming together, your soulmate has reached a realization that has completely changed the way they see your connection. For years, they believed the purpose of your meeting was something simple. They thought it was about timing. They thought it was about emotions. They thought it was about a particular chapter that began and ended within a specific period of their life. But now they are beginning to understand that the connection was operating on a much deeper level than they ever imagined. What shocked them most was not discovering that you mattered. It was discovering why you mattered. The truth started becoming clear when they stopped focusing on what happened between you and started focusing on what happened within them because of you. That shift changed everything. Suddenly, they could see how many parts of their life had been influenced by lessons connected to your presence. They could see how certain beliefs changed, how certain fears weakened, how certain strengths emerged. Looking back, it became obvious that your arrival marked the beginning of a transformation they did not fully recognize while it was happening. Because your heart needs this right now. Sometimes we believe people enter our lives to give us something. But often, they enter our lives to awaken something that already exists within us. They reveal strengths we didn't know we possessed. They uncover lessons we needed to learn. They help us become versions of ourselves we may never have reached on our own. Your soulmate is finally beginning to understand that this may have been your true purpose all along. And listen carefully. What stunned them most was realizing that many of the challenges connected to your journey were not obstacles at all. They were lessons. Lessons that pushed them toward growth. Lessons that forced them to become more self-aware. Lessons that prepared them for a deeper understanding of themselves and of life. The moments they once questioned now seem meaningful. The experiences they once struggled to understand now appear connected to a larger purpose. Every piece of the journey suddenly feels as though it belongs to a much bigger picture. The more they reflect, the clearer that picture becomes. They are beginning to understand that your connection was never meant to be measured only by circumstances, outcomes, or timelines. It was meant to be measured by impact. And when they honestly examine that impact, they can no longer deny how significant it has been. Your influence reached places they never expected. It shaped decisions, perspectives, emotional growth, and personal evolution in ways they are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Because your heart needs this right now. The most powerful connections are often the ones that continue teaching us long after we think the lesson is over. They leave fingerprints on our soul. They become part of our growth story. They remain present, not because we are holding on to the past, but because they helped create the person we are becoming. Your soulmate is finally recognizing that truth, and listen to this. The shocking realization they have reached is surprisingly simple. You did not enter their life by accident. You entered their life to create change. You entered their life to challenge them, awaken them, and guide them toward a deeper understanding of themselves. Every memory, every lesson, every emotional breakthrough now points toward the same conclusion. What they once viewed as a connection between two people was actually a catalyst for transformation. And now, after all the confusion has faded and all the pieces have fallen into place, they finally understand the real reason you crossed their path. You were never just a chapter in their story. You were one of the reasons their story became what it is today. And that truth has left them both humbled and amazed, because they now realize that some souls meet not merely to share moments, but to change each other forever.